How often have you accepted less than you deserve in a relationship, whether with friends, family, or even colleagues? Have you ever stopped to think about how disrespect, even in subtle forms, can slowly chip away at your self-esteem and confidence? Many of us tolerate situations that breach our boundaries without realizing the impact this has on our lives and on how we see ourselves. But what if there's a way to recognize this behavior, distance ourselves from disrespect, and finally embrace our true worth? Today, we're diving deep into these challenges, guided by the wisdom of renowned researcher Brené Brown. Brené has dedicated much of her career to studying vulnerability, courage, and self-worth, showing how these elements are essential for building an authentic and healthy life. In this video, we'll tap into her insights to understand why it's so important to recognize your worth, set boundaries, and break free from relationships that erode your self-esteem. From here on, you'll see that distancing yourself from disrespect is an act of self-care, and more than that, a decisive step towards strengthening your self-esteem and living more authentically. Together, we'll explore how to identify harmful relationships, set limits, and build self-confidence so that, in the end, you're better prepared to seek and cultivate spaces and connections where your worth is truly recognized. So, if you've been through situations where you felt you deserved more respect, or if you feel there's still something missing to solidify your self-esteem, stay with us. Throughout the video, I'll share ideas, stories, and reflections that could make a real difference on your journey. Ready to discover how to transform this reality? Let's start by understanding what disrespect is and how it directly impacts your self-esteem. Disrespect can show up in obvious ways, like insults or abusive behavior, but it can also be more subtle, like constant criticism, lack of empathy, or dismissing your opinions and feelings. These actions, while they may seem small, can add up and create an environment where you start to doubt your own value. Disrespect, then, goes far beyond an isolated behavior. It represents an attitude of disregard that, over time, deeply impacts the way you see yourself. Brené Brown, in her research on vulnerability and self-esteem, explains that repeated exposure to disrespectful treatment can lead people to shut down, making it harder to develop a solid sense of self-worth. When this happens, individuals may start to believe they have to accept less than they deserve or that, somehow, they aren't worthy of respect. Take Emma, for instance, a woman who, for years, endured demeaning comments at work. Her colleagues would often interrupt her, dismiss her ideas, and subtly undermine her confidence. Over time, Emma began to doubt her own abilities, and despite being a talented professional, she started to believe she might actually deserve this treatment. It was only when she recognized the pattern of disrespect and its effects on her self-esteem that she realized something had to change. This kind of situation is more common than you might think. When we tolerate disrespectful relationships, we allow the treatment we receive to shape how we view ourselves and what we believe we deserve. Brené Brown emphasizes that to nurture a healthy self-esteem, it's essential to have the courage to recognize environments that aren't emotionally safe. In other words, when we open ourselves up to vulnerability and trust, we must do so with people and in spaces that honor our worth. Understanding how disrespect impacts self-esteem is the first step toward realizing that, regardless of the circumstances, no one should settle for less than they deserve. Now that you grasp the effects of disrespect, let's talk about the power of boundaries and how they can help protect and restore your self-esteem. Setting clear boundaries is an act of self-respect and a way to protect your emotional well-being. These boundaries serve as barriers that establish what is and isn't acceptable in your relationships, whether personal, familial, or professional. When you define what you tolerate and what you don't, you're signaling to yourself and others just how much you value who you are. Brené Brown explains that setting boundaries is an act of courage and authenticity. Through her research, She found that people with healthy self-esteem not only have clarity about their boundaries, but also the courage to uphold them, even when it's uncomfortable. Defining boundaries requires you to recognize your worth and understand that, by respecting yourself, you reinforce your sense of dignity. But how does this work in practice? A good way to start setting boundaries is by clearly and directly communicating what you need. For example, if someone frequently interrupts or dismisses your ideas in a conversation, you could say, "When I share something important, it's essential that I'm listened to. I need an environment where I feel respected." This kind of statement shows that you value yourself and reinforces the respect you expect from others. A great example of this is Noah, a man who always accepted invitations from a friend, even when he felt uncomfortable with how that friend treated him. After learning about the importance of boundaries, Noah decided to have an honest conversation. He explained to his friend that certain behaviors bothered him, clearly describing what he was willing to accept and what he would no longer tolerate. This step brought a transformation to Noah's self-esteem. By respecting himself, he started to feel more confident and attracted relationships where respect was a priority. This story illustrates how, by setting boundaries, you strengthen yourself and take meaningful steps toward improving your self-esteem. These boundaries act as a filter, keeping out what's unhealthy and allowing you to draw closer to people and situations that truly support your growth. And by putting this practice into action, you can notice a real difference in how you see yourself and in the respect others begin to show you. Now that we've explored the power of boundaries, let's discuss the courage needed to distance yourself from relationships that don't respect those boundaries and that harm your well-being. Setting boundaries is a fundamental step, but in some situations, simply defining what's acceptable isn't enough. When people continue to disregard your boundaries and treat you disrespectfully even after you've made them clear, it's time for something more drastic: stepping away. This is a challenging moment, as it takes courage to put yourself first and recognize that some relationships may be doing more harm than good. Brené Brown emphasizes the importance of courage in preserving one's self-worth. Through her research, she explores the idea that it takes courage to make choices that protect our integrity, even if it means letting go of people or environments that don't treat us as we deserve. This process can bring up fears: fear of judgment, of seeming selfish, or even of facing loneliness. But Breen stresses that choosing yourself strengthens your self-esteem and puts you in control of your life. So, how can you do this in practice? The first step is to recognize the signs that disrespect is impacting you. This could show up as recurring anxiety when you see a particular person, feeling like you're constantly walking on eggshells, or noticing that, after each interaction, you feel less confident and more unsettled. Identifying these signs is crucial to understanding the negative impact certain relationships are having on your life. Next, it's time to reflect on your worth. Remember, your worth isn't in others' hands. It's an internal understanding, and by reaffirming it, you're telling yourself you deserve respect. From here, develop an action plan. This might mean gradually distancing yourself, limiting the time and types of interactions you have with certain people, or even cutting ties more definitively if necessary. A great example of this process is Olivia, who spent years trying to keep the peace with family members who continually disrespected her boundaries. Over time, Olivia realized that these relationships left her feeling drained and insecure. After much reflection, she decided to set healthy boundaries to protect her emotional well-being. Though difficult at first, this distance brought an immense sense of relief and strength, allowing her to find more positive and respectful relationships. Olivia's story highlights how the courage to step back can lead to true transformation. By prioritizing her well-being over the fear of disappointing others, she chose herself and reinforced her self-esteem. Now, let's discuss what happens after you take that step back and how you can embrace your worth and build new relationships that genuinely respect who you are. Now that you understand the importance of moving away from disrespectful relationships, it's time to embrace a new phase, recognizing and accepting your own worth. Brené Brown emphasizes that self-esteem shouldn't rely on external validation but on a deep and sincere acceptance of who we are. Once you internalize your worth, it becomes easier to seek out and maintain relationships built on respect and reciprocity. But what does it really mean to embrace your worth? First and foremost, it's about recognizing that, regardless of others' opinions, you are worthy of respect and positive relationships. This means cultivating a positive self-perception, practicing self-compassion consistently, and staying mindful of self-care. This phase involves honest reflection. What qualities make me a valuable person? Writing down these qualities and revisiting them whenever necessary helps reinforce a positive self-image, especially after experiencing disrespect. To strengthen this new phase of self-esteem, it's also essential to adopt habits that promote well-being. Simple practices, like setting aside time for activities you love, reflecting on your values, and setting personal goals, all reinforce your commitment to your self-worth. When you treat yourself with kindness, this respect reflects in how others perceive and treat you too. Mary's story illustrates this phase beautifully. After leaving a relationship where her worth was repeatedly undermined, she decided to focus on her own growth. Mary began exploring new activities like meditation and therapy to rebuild her self-esteem. Over time, she attracted new friendships and even a relationship that valued her for who she truly was. The impact of embracing her worth was profound and transformative. Recognizing your worth not only strengthens your self-esteem, but also acts as a natural filter for future relationships. By internalizing that you deserve respect and reciprocity, you create a new reality around you, one where disrespect has no place. In today's journey, we've seen the importance of recognizing signs of disrespect, setting boundaries, and having the courage to distance ourselves from what diminishes us. We discussed how essential it is to embrace our worth to build relationships founded on reciprocity and respect. These steps form a path of self-empowerment and growth, a journey that, while challenging, offers a unique freedom to be who we truly are and to choose who we allow into our lives. Throughout this video, guided by Brené Brown's insights, we've explored how to identify disrespect, the importance of setting and communicating boundaries, the strength needed to distance ourselves from what harms us, and finally, the power of recognizing our intrinsic worth. But this transformation goes beyond just watching. It requires ongoing self-reflection and the willingness to put these changes into practice. So, what do you think? Are you ready to take these steps towards self-awareness and self-esteem? Reflect on what we discussed today, analyze your relationships, and start implementing clear boundaries. If this message resonated with you, leave a comment sharing your experiences or challenges with disrespect and self-worth. And of course, share this video with someone who could benefit from these insights. Who knows, you might just inspire someone else to transform their life too. Now, it's up to you. Remember, by stepping away from disrespect and embracing your worth, you're building the path to a more authentic and fulfilling life.